with starting recording now with one of our first roundtables here on community risk reduction. I'm still going to wait a minute or two before we formally get started, just probably about a minute. But it just you all have done the Zoom drill enough to know if you just continue to keep your Zoom. Feel free to have your cameras on. We welcome it, but please keep it on mute when you're not talking, and just continue to be open and mindful and respectful as you all are. We're all pretty digitally literate now. But we'll get started here, and more people will jump in. I would please thank you, Jeff. Fire up the chat. Who are you? Where are you from? And maybe something like, what does CRR mean to you? I always welcome that very much. Just kind of continue to get it going. If CRR in one word. But my name is Kevin Sofin. I'm the Director of Innovation at W. Starling Company, as well as one of the co-founders of SmartFirefighting.com. And this is part of our roundtable series that we have we're trying to do a bi-monthly basis about various topics. And today we're very fortunate to have both Karen Berard-Reed, who is a Senior Strategist, Community Risk Reduction Lead at NFPA, and Chelsea Rubidoux, Community Risk Reduction Strategist at NFPA, along with sort of my brother from another mother and co-host Kirk McKenzie, retired fire captain and founder of McKenzie Smart Technologies. And today we're talking about community risk reduction. I'd be asking, well, what is community risk reduction? Yes, the installation of smoke alarms is still an important piece of that, and important, but it's so much more than that. And what else can we do to continue to be proactive, help reduce call volumes, to free resources elsewhere, and just continue to allow first responders to be more effective, efficient at what they do. So it's a very important topic, near and dear to my heart. It's great to see all the people here, and I encourage you to keep firing up the chat. And to start, just for the format, I'm going to pass this over to Kirk, who will give part of his perspective on sort of the smart CRR for the next kind of the future. Then we are going to switch over to Karen and Chelsea to give their perspective on all things CRR. Then there'll be open roundtable, sort of organized pandemonium, where we welcome questions and just ask you all to continue to be mindful and respectful. So without further ado, and enough of me talking, Kirk, the floor is yours. And please, a quick little intro of yourself as well. You're on mute, Kirk. 2020 things.
I did as you said, as instructed, made sure I was muted. Thanks so much. Am I sharing screen appropriately?
You're sharing the slide.
Very good.
The intro. Thanks for doing that.
The introduction is 34 years in the fire rescue business, 32 years on the line, and really into nerdy stuff right now. Grateful to be here today with some actual SMEs and community risk reduction. I'll just share a few slides on what I'm seeing that I think we should be tracking, things like virtual reality. For the first slide was fire extinguisher training. How do we get our community prepared for when they see a fire, to position themselves between the heat and the exit so that they don't get stuck in the building, and use systems like virtual reality systems like flame trainer systems. How do we educate those that live in the wildland urban interface or anywhere near there, since we've seen recently that fires actually take out entire communities, not just those buildings that are at the edge. And how do we show them what it looks like to prepare a structure in advance of a fire front? These are tools that are on the market today that can, I think, or have been making a difference in educating the public on all sorts of things, everything from vehicle or driver safety, don't text and drive, to preparing for the big event, if you will. There's constantly new mapping systems coming out, and people can become aware of their environments and know where the hazards are, and to be intelligently safer and more resilient in their communities. And the last note before I turn it over to our SMEs, I have a few more advanced things after they chat before we open it up. But applications like the Western Fire Chief's new fire map that is helping community members be aware in the actual time of intervention and the time of event, and how can they be aware about where they might want to plan their escape routes and what the condition of the fire is currently. So Kevin, thanks for giving me a minute on the floor, and I'll turn it back over to you and our SMEs. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain. So yeah, very much the glance at the future, but at the same time, a lot of stuff that's happening today and available, and a lot of really interesting technologies. And so now we're very fortunate to be joined with Chelsea and Karen. So if you two want to do a quick little introduction as well, and just to everyone, just know that in 10-ish, 15-ish minutes, we're going to open it up for organized pandemonium questions and just continue to be good conversation. So Chelsea and Karen, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Great, thank you. So I think I will kick things off here and then toss the baton over to Chelsea in just a bit. So I am Karen Berard-Reed, for those of you who I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet. Nice to see some familiar faces and names on our chat today, and as well as meet some new folks. I am the Senior Strategist and Community Risk Reduction Lead at NFPA, so I do oversee almost all things CRR at NFPA, with the exception of NFPA 1300, and that's Chelsea's baby there. She is the staff liaison for that standard. And so I've been at NFPA for, oh my goodness, almost 10 years. And before I jumped into the community risk reduction space, I worked specifically in public education in high risk outreach. So managed things like our urban task force and our Remembering When Fall and Fire Prevention for Older Adults initiative, the Learn Not to Burn preschool program. So all of the things that really touch those high risk audiences. Before that, I did come from the education world. I have a background in health education and health promotion, and was able to be fortunate enough to work in both community settings, K-12 settings, and also in higher ed. So kind of a rich background that brought me here, and really, really excited to be kind of landing in the community risk reduction space, because it ties it all together, all my experiences together with a nice bow. So we're having a real good time with this. So, all right. So we thought it would be helpful to kind of start off talking just a little bit about community risk reduction and what it really means. I appreciate that Kevin started off by saying, well, what is community risk reduction anyway? Chelsea, could we go to the next slide, please?
Yes.
There we go. And if you've ever been on our CRR kitchen table, you know that Chelsea and I like to keep things kind of casual. So at any point, if you have a question, feel free to just jump on in and shout out. We're happy to talk a little bit more. So when we talk about community risk reduction, we are talking about a process. There is a standard. It is the standard on community risk assessment and community risk reduction plan development. I might have a copy or 7 or so sitting around here.
There's one right behind your head.
Absolutely. And you can see it's not a huge document, which is really, really nice. It's portable, it's readable, and just outlines things with some concision. So we do appreciate that and all the work that the committee did putting that standard together. But when we talk about CRR, we really are talking about this process to identify and prioritize local risks, followed by the integrated and strategic investment of resources to reduce their occurrence and impact. I know you can read that definition, but quite frankly, it's worth saying over and over again. CRR is a process, and we are really hoping that people are using this process as a tool to find out what their true risks are in the community and then address those risks. Chelsea and I did quite a bit of research when we started the CRR project, and we had an opportunity to kind of go out and talk to many, many, many different people about community risk reduction. We talked to people who loved it. We talked to people who were not fond of it at all, and everyone in between. And one of the things that we found out is that there are people who are doing lots and lots of really great things. And also listening to Kirk just in his introduction talk about some of those interesting projects and initiatives that are moving forward now. Those are all interventions that are being put to use to manage or mitigate some of the risks that are identified through this process. When we talk about community risk reduction, we do talk about the community risk assessment as that critical first step, because essentially we want to make sure that folks are taking the resources that they have and ensuring that they will be impactful. We see a lot of folks who don't do that community risk assessment piece, and they plan these awesome creative interventions that might be well loved and they might be well received, but they might not necessarily be impactful because they're not aligned to the true risks in the community. So we really encourage folks to look at that piece, consider it that critical first step, and put the effort into doing that assessment to make sure they truly understand the landscape that they're dealing with. Another piece to that is the community risk reduction plan. Once you have identified and then prioritized the risks, you develop a plan to manage those risks. Also noteworthy that it is a process that involves many people. If you've met someone who said, oh, you can just kind of sit in front of your computer on a weekend and do a community risk assessment all by yourself, you might want to question that, because it is time consuming, it is thought provoking, and it is collaborative. So you want to engage your partners, your stakeholders, and your community collaborators in that process. And then lastly, we also like to mention that community risk reduction is an all hazards approach. We know that many departments now consider them to be all hazards response agencies. We would also encourage them to look at prevention similarly. We know that risks for fire exist, but we know in some communities, other hazards are bigger problems for them. But yet the fire department is responding. So therefore, let's work towards prevention of those issues as well. So for example, some communities have drowning problems, and certainly that impacts the residents, it impacts the first responders. We definitely want to prepare for those. I just saw a question flash on my screen about definitions of partners and stakeholders. Yep, that is defined in the standard. Essentially, when we talk about partners, and where did I see Chelsea's note there?
I know.
Sorry.
At the same time.
It's funny because my chat is not, it's just flashing. I need to open it up. There we go. When we talk about partners, we're talking about the people who are involved in doing the work associated with that community risk reduction plan. When we speak of stakeholders, we're talking about the people who are impacted by the work that's being done or by the plan. Chelsea, did I capture that to your satisfaction?
So. Yeah, I'm satisfied. Is David satisfied is the question. I will, once we get into the Q&A, I can pull up the definition too. I just have a lot of screens and stuff for the presentation, but the short answer is yes, David, and I will get you the specifics after, but I think Karen's summary gets you 80% of the way there, 85, 90, 95.
Thank you. Perfect. All right, one more click, Chelsea. All right, so what does community risk reduction really get you? If you're following this process, primarily you will have data-informed practice. We are not participating in guesswork. It's not that spray and pray method, you know, like let's just shoot some stuff out here and hope it sticks to the wall. We are looking at what the data tell us about the risks in the community to ensure that we are impactful, which is the next piece, impactful interventions. We should have the word, oh, we do at the end, evaluation on here, recognizing that we know that they're impactful because you're going to participate in evaluation of your initiatives as well. Why do fire chiefs like community risk reduction? This is this middle box, efficient resource deployment, recognizing that budgets are always stretched. And people are answering questions about where the money goes. Community risk reduction really helps those decision makers ensure that they're spending the money in the right places and in places that are going to have a positive impact on the community. And similarly, equitable resource deployment. By identifying high-risk audiences and high, important hazards in the community, you're really able to focus those resources towards the people in the community who really need them and really making a difference in the impact of your programming. All right. Go ahead,
Also
Chelsea.
with that.
Yes, thank you. All right, so we are in this Smart Firefighting Roundtable. So of course, it's important to talk a little bit about data as we move forward. One of the biggest questions that we get in that community risk assessment piece is, what community data are we really talking about? And luckily in the standard, the committee has outlined 9 community profiles that really help us to organize those buckets of data that should be considered when doing a risk assessment through this process. And so the colorful bars on the side here really kind of highlight the different categories that we have to consider. The purple ones really are about the people in the community. We're talking about all the information about demographics for the people that each fire department is serving. And I'm saying fire department, but please keep in mind that NFPA 1300 really was written to serve a wide variety of audiences. We work in a space where the fire service really typically takes the lead in community risk reduction, but it doesn't have to be that way. If there's another community organization that is well suited to take the lead for this process, the standard supports them as well. In addition to the demographics, the profiles will look at public service response agencies, so fire, EMS, police, etc., and community service organizations. We're very well aware that there are lots of agencies across the community that support community safety, and we need to consider them. So we might be talking about elder affairs, we might be talking about the Department of Health, you might even be talking about a local hospital. And then in addition to that, things like Meals on Wheels or your animal clubs, the Elks Club, for example, the Eagles Club, the Kiwanis, the Rotarians, they all may have a role in your community data. The yellow boxes give us some what about the community. We've got geography, building stock, economics, and critical infrastructure. So each of those will help really complete that data story to describe the landscape of the community and help the CRR team really identify both the risk and the capacity in the community. We talk about past loss and event history. It's kind of a mildly controversial risk profile or community profile. And I say that only because in some folks' eyes, they feel like this is the most important one. If we look at what happened in the past, we'll be able to plan really impactful interventions. And it is a key bucket of information, but the reality is it's not the whole story. You can do some really, really strong risk reduction work by focusing on the demographics and geography and building stock in your community, for example, as well. And then, of course, the hazards that are present as well. So things like weather, for example, that might be unique to a particular area and have to be considered in that risk reduction programming. Okay. Thanks, Chelsea.
So, yeah. All right, so that's a lot of data, and that becomes really overwhelming to a lot of folks. What we have done over the past few years is developed a data dashboard that we call Craig 1300. If you have seen Karen and I anywhere in the past couple of years, you've probably met this little character already. Craig stands for CRA Insight Generator. And its purpose is to put it covers details from all of these profiles, just all in one place at your fingertips, easy to digest. I'm going to show you a quick demo, but if you want to scan that QR code, that'll take you to the official landing page and you can learn more. Yeah, so I will hop into there. So this is, you can still see my screen, right?
Yes.
The demo. Okay. All right. So this is an example of Craig 1300 Plus. This is from Montgomery County, Maryland. What the plus means and why Craig is green here is this includes their incident data, the stuff that Karen was just going on about. So it has their, fire response data and that sort of stuff in here. But let's show some examples. Actually, I'll start with the crosswalk. So the profiles Karen just outlined as part of NFPA 1300, demographics, geography, etc. We created this crosswalk as a place to start that gives you direction to all of the relevant pages for those profiles. So if you want to follow the NFPA 1300 process, this page is supposed to make it easy. So if we want to take a look at some demographics first, I don't know, perhaps we're interested in language isolation, so we'll check that out. And you'll see throughout the dashboard that information is presented in a bunch of different ways. We have these neat little call outs that you can kind of just take screenshots of, throw them on your social media, throw them in a report or a presentation. This dashboard compares your geography to your state and also the country, which can become important too if you want to know how you stack up. There are bar graphs that break down the information, again, making it easy to understand. You don't have to figure out how to put this in a presentable format. It's already done for you. You can toggle things on and off. Perhaps you're not interested in the United States or the state even, and you just want to see what the language spoken at home is in Montgomery County. It's all pretty customizable. Another thing you can do is export the data that makes up the visualizations. So you can click, I think it's this button, export as CSV, and that'll give you all of the raw data in a CSV file. If you have somebody on your team who does like to do some of that data tinkering, I know that those departments are very fortunate, but I know that they can sometimes be few and far between. So again, another bar chart that has to do with poverty. Here you can see that we're kind of doing some overlapping already. We're figuring out who might fall under the poverty line and what language do they speak. So now you can kind of figure out, how can we reach these people? How can we communicate with them? That sort of thing. Again, this is where they live. So how can we find them? Where are they? You can click into specific census tracts and get really specific information here. Not only do the darker the color, the more limited the English is spoken at home. And when you click in, you get their specifics about what languages they are speaking. So this tool, just this page alone, has just so much rich data that can help inform your community risk assessment and also your interventions. Let's take a look. I know that census data is probably the easiest for our crews to kind of wrap their heads around. I know it's not all that new, but putting it in this digestible format all in one spot really helps. But we also have information from places like the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the Department of Transportation. I'm going to pull up a page about utilities. Just to kind of show you examples. Again, we could spend hours in this dashboard, so this is just a quick overview. This is a map. It's still populating. 1 second. Of the
Chelsea,
natural gas.
I was at a meeting last week, Chelsea, and somebody had their own dashboard open and they're kind of playing around with it. And I just was able to point. I said, did you know it did this? And I clicked on I think it was the toggling. And they're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea it did that. So it is true. Right? You can just poke around all the time and find new things and new capabilities.
So true. And in this, we can see, this is actually, I'll use this as an interesting example. Here in Massachusetts a few years ago, I think it made national news, but we had a huge run of explosions from Columbia Gas. And that's the brand or the utility that you see right here on the screen. You can see exactly where the pipelines run through. So, had we had an inkling that maybe there was something fishy going on or some issues, you can kind of narrow down right into the areas that might be impacted by something. And I see a hand, so I got a little squirrel. So Kim, do you have a question?
Chief Z, what do you got?
Well, I think this is actually, I like it. I have not seen it, so it's really good. Recently, last week, was out in California with for the technology summit with Cal Chiefs Ops Section and Fire Scope. In fact, Mike and Anthony were out there with us. But as I look at the things we do back and forth and how we share databases and that, FEMA just recently came out with some data, looking at all the disasters across the country, which I think would be, something. I look at this and I look at some of the stuff that Israel's doing, how we integrate that, as well as NOAA just came out with some great statistics on disasters at whole. And those are types of things I look at as we're talking, in today's day of analytics. And I don't have to say a lot to Mike Cox and some of the work he's doing with high chiefs and where they're going with that. But the analytics is really the key to where we go. And an examples I'm going to share is that 2020, we had a fire in California in Butte County that took out Berry Creek, or a lot of Berry Creek. And of course, most people know this as a FireWise community. It'd be really interesting to go back and really take a look at what was done and why we lost so many structures in there, and then look at the demographics then versus how they recovered. Kind of like, if you go back and look at, Paradise and look, 5 years down the road, where they were, where they're at, how many people stayed or not. And, they're on a very good path to doing things better. But I think those are really, some of the things that as I look at today's day and age, where I'm actually hoping we go at some point with some of our technology and how we share this. I look at Oregon as really being very progressive, and also, with where they've gone on the wildland side. Just a couple thoughts.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if that was my notes. Chelsea and Karen, I think if you wanted to continue to finish off anything here, I think want to now, if any, feel free to finish off, but want to turn it over to open up to the audience. I already see a couple good questions and some of these other CR great minds. So Chelsea,
I can also, if you're cool with it, Kevin, I can leave this up and we can take questions. And if something's relevant, I'll scroll to it if that works for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So Chelsea, there's a couple of questions here in the chat that I was starting to type furiously away. And then I realized I didn't have a chance to talk about this. So,
go for it.
So Kurt was asking how agencies get to be part of the CREG program data digest. And I don't know if I'm completely interpreting your question the way that you intend it to be, but I will say that, so CREG 1300 is a product at this point in time. Initially, when we were working on this project, we had a pilot project with 300 fire departments across the United States, at which point we had wonderful involvement from so many different communities that helped us to be able to create CREG 1300. It is a for sale product at this point in time, but basically anybody who wants it in the United States has access to it. And then a kind of a follow-up and related question to that. Robert says, I live in a small community consisting of 3 towns. Do you think we could form a small regional CRR group? How many is too many suggestions for those to invite? Okay, Robert, I think your question is specific to CRR and not as specific to CRA, because I was going to answer it the other way. In terms of CREG, the interesting thing is that even the CREG dashboard works regionally. We have had some professional organizations. So for example, one that comes to mind is Lee County Fire Marshals Association, which was able to obtain the CREG 1300 dashboard for their county. And then all of the different fire service groups within that county were able to access it. So that's kind of a nice thing. But to answer your question about CRR groups, like a CRR committee across a variety of towns, I think absolutely. And I think this happens a lot, quite frankly. I'm thinking specifically, Chelsea, of Battlefield, Missouri. I don't know if anyone knows Chief Scott Moore there, but we've worked with Battlefield, and they have very interesting service boundaries. I think he said he has to report to 11 different community leadership organizations because of the way the boundaries fall, and they have villages and cities and communities all falling within that. But their CRR committee is comprised of a variety of different municipalities, I guess you would say. It's really hard to say how many is too many because it's all so unique. We do like to say that the most effective community risk reduction takes place at the neighborhood level. It's really easiest to see the risk the smaller you go, but you have to balance that with capacity, because if you have a neighborhood area and you don't have any partners and people to do the work, then it becomes really challenging. So there's probably an algorithm out there. I'm going to flip that to you, Kurt, indirectly. Maybe this is an AI piece we can get in here, right? Trying to determine what the best algorithm is. in thinking about balancing capacity and risk to come up with the most effective CRR initiative. just popped into my head. So,
Well, one thing I want to encourage, and we'll kind of keep talking through, and feel free to fire up the chat with questions, but we'll go for at least another 30 minutes and maybe a little bit longer. And I want everyone to be selfish here in kind of any questions that you have around or bringing insights. And I mean, I'm looking around the group and I see some really brilliant minds around this topic and just in the fire service in general. And thanks, Kim Z, for being the first to kind of, besides us, to chime in, but wanted to sort of turn it over to anyone else to kind of maybe throw in your 2 cents, ask a question. I ask that you don't kind of talk longer than maybe a minute or two max, just to continue to give everyone the opportunity to speak. But I'm looking at you, Brent Faulkner, first, Mr. Virtual CRR himself, someone I've learned a lot about CRR from. But Brent, I'd love if you maybe could start just give a little intro of yourself and maybe any of the comments or questions about what you've seen and heard today from Karen and Chelsea.
Yeah, definitely. Brent Faulkner, Virtual CRR. I know quite a few of you guys that are on today, and I'll take any opportunity I will to hang out with Chelsea and Karen anytime. Thank you guys very much. I appreciate it.
Hey, will I see you at CFPI next week?
Yes, I will be at CFPI.
All right, so we'll get a chance to hang out.
Perfect. I love that. I did want to talk about, I'm sorry, was it Chris? Who was the one that was talking about? Robert. Okay, Robert, with the small community. I think that that's a brilliant idea. I just want to add on to what they talked about. The reason why I think it's such a good idea is because especially the smaller communities typically don't have all of the resources that the larger communities do. So when you pool your resources from lots of different areas, you're able to do a lot more, and especially when they're neighboring communities, because there's a good chance that a lot of the risks that you have within your community are going to be common from those other communities as well. So you're going to be able to do things like pool your resources for possible grant funding, pool your resources as far as your physical resources, the people that can actually do, some of your CRA work for you or your mitigation techniques, all of those types of things. So anytime that you have the ability to look at things regionally, and I agree 100% that as local and as small as you can get is what we're searching for. But when we're talking about resources, we have to pull those resources, from a broader spectrum so that we have more resources to be able to give to our personal communities, especially when we're talking about the smaller communities, because as we know, oftentimes those smaller communities don't have either the same funding levels or they don't have the same staffing levels to be able to get things done. So those are my 2 cents. Unfortunately, I have another appointment. I'll be listening in, but I don't know how much interaction I'm going to be able to do. But thank you guys. You guys are all amazing, and can't wait to see you all soon.
Yeah, good to see you, Brent.
Thank you for your work, Brent.
Thanks, Brent.
Karen, did you want to maybe give the short answer to Sarah, and maybe you could give the longer answer afterwards? But Sarah,
my short answer to Sarah is to check her 554 codes.
What codes? The 55 codes?
The 554s, which is for kind of a proxy for lift assists for many departments.
What was the code? 555?
554. I think it says assisting an invalid officially. So
yeah,
we say
you'll
that
get
because
some good data there.
Yeah, when Chelsea and I are out on the road, invalid assist. Thank you. And we'll ask, we always ask the question, like, what are the calls that your firefighters are going to that they would really like to stop going to? And it's these calls. So when we think about community risk reduction from the perception of addressing pain points within the fire service, as well as assisting residents who are at risk, this is a big one, as well as increasing efficiencies, right? Do we need to be going to those same addresses over and over and over again? Or is there another way? And will the community risk reduction process assist in that? So kind of my short answer.
That seems to fit in line with the trying to minimize the preventable calls, to those things that
exactly
don't need to be a call, to put a strain on the labor and assets, and just so we can maximize the minimal resources that we have.
Yeah, I will
Yes.
also say, like, in your in the way you wrote your question, Sarah, is like, we don't have just one, but our calls are 70% medical. And it's like, there's your answer. Sometimes it's just a reframing. Like, it sounds like your question was maybe like, but the other 30 is scattered, but tap into that 70, find, like, again, those 554 codes, the lift assists, and then overlaying that with data, like the people who you are responding to for those medical calls, like where do they live, what languages do they speak, where do they fall on the income level, like what other issues might they be faced with, and that might help you connect with some other partners that can kind of take some of that off your hands, perhaps. But again, there is a long answer and we could talk about it for a long time. So.
And before we drift too far away from it, I feel like I have to give a little bit of my longer answer. And you're actually exemplifying why I was saying earlier that past loss and event history is a little bit of a controversial category, because it's the one that people go to first. And when you're in this situation, when you pull away the curtain and look at that data, Chelsea and I did a project in Ohio, and we started there as well. And we went, well, there's not a whole lot here. What are we really going to talk about? But you got to pull away the curtain and shift your thinking away from the incidents and more about the people. And when you start really looking at where those incidents are taking place, which is one of the reasons why when we were developing Craig 1300, we said maps are critical. Just being able to see what the incidents are isn't as helpful as also being able to see where they're happening. The where is critical, because once we know where they're happening and where the clusters of incidents are happening, we are really looking at unique neighborhoods that carry unique risks. And then we can go deeper and say, well, who's living here? What's happening with the residents in this neighborhood? Do they have access to information? Do they have health insurance? Are they using EMS as their transportation service? What is really going on with these folks? And are there some root causes that we can address to reduce the risk, rather than taking it from above and looking at the actual incidents?
Thanks, Karen. So that was great from Brent and Sarah. I love it, and I just want to continue to try and cover as many topics as possible. I sometimes like doing this, is volunteering someone. Robert, I see your camera is on, and I've enjoyed just thank you for being here. But wondering, Robert, I don't know if we've actually met, but I thank you for being here. I'm wondering if you wanted to maybe drop your 2 cents or ask any question if you felt comfortable doing that. And you're on mute, by the way.
Yeah, so a long story short is I went to a NFA class, a community risk reduction class up at the National Fire Academy in Emmitsburg, Maryland, where I first learned about this subject. And so the San Antonio Fire Department is really trying to inculcate, align itself with the rest of this, bring it into sort of, make it a bigger issue within the city of San Antonio community risk reduction. So we're sort of divided into sort of fire prevention and community risk reduction, which is sort of where they basically give speeches about how to reduce fires. But I think there's a bigger overarching, component of CR that we're missing. And so that's the reason why I'm logged on today and just trying to figure out how the city of San Antonio can make it a bigger part, of their practices.
Thanks, Robert. Karen or Kirk, you want to?
I want to jump in. Robert, are you familiar with the Good Sam app?
Yes, I think, yes.
Well,
Is that
so for those that aren't, I thought it was San Antonio Fire Department was running something, and this brings it back to Sarah. So if 70% of your calls are medical, I like the discussion on, well, let's not go to the calls we don't need to go to, for instance, so that when somebody actually has cardiac arrest, we've practiced high performance CPR and we target that. Like if we're having deaths from cardiac arrest, let's do our best job with that. And part of that good job is by skipping the calls that don't need an ambulance or first responder response. They just need that transportation. And the Good Sam app allows a dispatcher to be on scene virtually with artificial intelligence and computer vision. And maybe the patient's saying, no, I don't need an ambulance. I just need a prescription to an antibiotic. And, alert and oriented ×4, no shortness of breath. Can you get me a ride? And a digital token for transportation to a clinic is all they need, and that's what they get. And I thought San Antonio saved like 3,500 dispatches one year. And my guess is one of those dispatches that was prevented was critical in saving the life of somebody in the community. So yes, to your point, about everything more than fire, we only do what? 5% fire and fire rescue. It's about 95% of the other stuff, and fire too.
Thanks, Captain. Robert, if you want, I'm gonna pass over to the other gentleman who has his camera on. Another guy I've learned quite a bit from recently is Chris. Chris, love if you wanted to give any your kind of your 2 cents, questions, comments, kind of your hot take on what we've been talking about.
Oh yeah, well, hey, first of all, thank you to the presentation, because the CRR stuff is kind of interesting, and where we kind of come into the mix, we make a lot of the interventions we're talking about, from the fire extinguisher training systems to the virtual reality fire sprinkler demo and our fire safety trailers and stuff like that. So it's fascinating because our discussion a lot of times is that, like, I think even like Robert's a good example of like jumping on here, because I think people are so hungry to understand what CRR is, right? And CRA is, because a lot of times they're just 3 letters that most people don't know about, right? And then taking that a step further is these departments who are lacking the funding to be able to put this into action, right? Which is I think that's the key thing of all our discussions on these roundtables is, these are all great. It's how do we actually make them happen in the masses of the fire service, right? How do we get all these departments to actually participate or gain this information and then be able to put it into action? That's one of my daily battles is figuring out how do these departments, not only apply for grants, but I mean, let's have that discussion. Even you talk about the sprinkler campaigns and all the stuff going on. This last year, the number of awarded departments on FPS grants went down tremendously. Okay. So there were a lot of, departments going, what do we do? What other funding sources are there to get these initiatives going? So that's why I welcome that discussion of ideas out there. I think the education of CRR as the concept or the process that it really is so key to the masses in the fire service, just because we're starting to see it. Everyone wants the cool toys, right? Everyone wants the cool stuff, but we got to justify the how. One, because that's how they get funding, but 2, then there's some more teeth. Because in an example you guys just mentioned is, again, I'm retired off the job, but bringing up the invalid assist, right? You didn't want to be assigned to the truck usually, because you were usually going to take an invalid assist at 2 o'clock every morning at the nursing home. It was just the way it was. The fact is being able to target those is pretty fascinating, as a whole nother component of this to reducing our manpower needs, our cost, needs and stuff like that. So, one of the things that I say we're trying to do is we're trying to incorporate a little more of the disaster planning, that big picture stuff. And one of them is we just actually, for anybody on the West Coast, I'll be in OCFA on Monday. We just delivered a new fire safety simulator at Orange County. And one of the things we added to it was an earthquake simulation and a red flag warning system for educating on red flag. So that was never been done before. But if anybody wants, we're going to be doing a demo of it on Tuesday at OC or OCFA's headquarters. But so it's one of the things we're trying to do, I know I'm over the minute, but is if there's other ideas of trying to package as much even on their intervention side to get more bang for your buck, but to be able to reach, I say that invalid assist, that EMS call, all those little tidbits, because really for the intervention side and the putting into process, we kind of have to bulk it together, because really the funding's not there to try to hit every point, and I think Karen's shaking her head in agreements to some extent, but I'm up for ideas,
I'll set that to Karen and Chelsea. Any sort of comments, and then I'll throw it over to the Chief Z. So Karen and Chelsea, any response, and then we'll go to Chief Z.
I was like, is Chelsea going to start? No, I'll start. Yeah, I mean, funding obviously is always a struggle. I would try to come at that in probably two different directions. One of those is don't stop applying for those FP&S grants, and certainly be able to talk the talk about the community risk reduction process in that grant. They love to hear about community risk assessments and how you're going to use that data, or if you haven't done one yet, saying that that is a priority of your project, and then the rest of your interventions will be data driven. That is feedback that we have heard. And then the other piece is leveraging your community risk reduction committee or team or whatever it is that you're calling it, and recognizing that you may have sources of funding locally who are very interested in supporting community safety because it helps their business thrive. You know, it's really about flipping the script a little bit and helping people understand that a safe community is a business healthy community, if you will. I mean, it's just like another way of looking at it. And do people always make those connections? And sometimes, you know, connecting the dots for them is very helpful.
Thanks, Karen. Chelsea, anything you want to add there or before we go? Chief Z, you got your hand up.
Yeah, going back to Chris's conversation, when I look at simulation, you know, I think some of what you're getting ready to do is, you know, Orange County Fire Authority is really good. You know, one of the big components I see missing in a lot of today's operations is not enough focus on what happens in those command centers, those dispatch 911 centers, and a lot more technology than there's ever been, a lot more pressure and everything else. And I think the ability to, you know, do simulations with those folks can go a long ways. And I could go back to Santana Row in San Jose years ago under construction, caught fire, and became a pretty major event and loss at that time. No different than during an earthquake, if your folks in that dispatch center don't know how to request mutual aid or where to get the resources, a big issue. Other conversation you're talking about is, you know, even before that was, you know, I think the time, unfortunately, nobody wants to hear this, but the time for waiting for some of our local politicians, even our state legislatures, to do what needs to be done is almost done. I mean, we repeatedly, you know, repeat the same emergencies, disasters ongoing. And I sometimes always come back to the more we tie into what we want somebody to do, into the funding they either get or don't get, the better off we're going to be. You know, Oregon came very close after the 2020 fire season to actually putting in some good WUI codes. And, you know, like any good place, even like Colorado recently, the builders and developers are just fearful what's going to cost. And, you know, the amount of money that they're going to save that the rest of us are going to spend is ridiculous. And I think that the more we tie in, you know, that if you want to get, you know, disaster dollars, you know, federal dollars tied into the fact that you have to perform or have put codes in place, the better off we're going to be. And I don't care whether it's for WUI, for floods or tornadoes. I think the more that is really, you know, it's the only way we're going to save money, because the statistics aren't looking very good right now for how much we continue to spend and pay out. But we have the data. We just don't have the elected desire and the ability to do what's right for everybody.
Thanks, Chief Z. So I want to, you know, we still got at least 12 minutes. We might go a little bit over. I want to be mindful of everyone's time. But right now, floor is open. It's an open dance floor. You might, you know, kind of the first person to go out might be a little bit nerve wracking, but we've had some great comments and insights. But I'm looking around, you know, some names I actually haven't seen from, you know, Chad Miller, Tom Mooney, Billy Kraft, Lisa Braun, Brianna Baker, Sylvia Peace, Vincent Quintino. I've seen some of you in the CRR emails. Like, any of you got a question or 2 cents? I don't want to call one person in particular, but if you have something right now, see, Chad, you came off mute, and let's come off there. I'd love to hear thoughts, questions, 2 cents, and we'd love to, yeah, floor is yours for a little bit.
Awesome. I appreciate it. There I am. So we are starting to kind of dip our feet into the community risk reduction realm. And we have, like it was mentioned earlier, a bunch of ideas that we've kind of always done things this way. So that's why we've kept these programs going. And we've put a massive halt to everything that we're doing to really step back and to evaluate the data that we are about the call volumes that we're responding to, the incident information, but also trying to recognize the local risks within our community as well. So I'm very interested to continue to learn about all this, the different programs, how to develop a community risk analysis with the data, originally looking towards the CAD data that we have, which depending on the dispatcher that puts it in, can kind of be some messy data.
Mhm.
So that's kind of been a big deterrent, or something that has just kind of been an obstacle for us, is how do I find that clean data? And it goes back to the fire reports that are put in, but then we have firefighters that work part-time for us that are doing these reports, and it's only as good as the information that gets put into the reporting system, which we are making adjustments to as well. So I guess for me, the big thing that I'm taking away is how do I make this community risk analysis? Like, how do I move forward where I also attended the National Fire Academy's community risk reduction course. I'm bought in with developing and creating these programs. However, it seems like I keep getting stopped at the gathering data component. So any advice that you have for that?
I have advice and you're not going to like it.
Perfect.
I'm going to speak boldly. Use it. Use the data. Use the data. Think about this. The people who are putting that data in never get to see what happens to it. They never have any results from it. And what we have found time and time again, particularly in the first stage of our pilot project, we created these dashboards and sent them back out to folks after they had sent data to us. We sent them back, and what we heard over and over again and said,
That's not my data.
That's not my data.
Yes, it is.
We said, yeah, it is. This is what you sent, which was painful on many levels, but that dissonance is needed for change, right? You have to make people uncomfortable with the current situation in order to lead to growth. And when people realize that it in fact is their data, and they realized it's their data because of X, Y, and Z, protocols that are in place or perhaps not in place, and it's fixable, then change was able to happen. Does that help you with your incident data right now in the moment? Maybe not, but you have to be forward thinking in this process. So use the data and make the people who put the data in come to you and say, that's not my data, because that's how the change will really happen. Because if they're the ones who are saying like, wow, we need to clean this up, we need to fix this, we need to do things a little bit differently, then you're already at the buy-in stage. And that's a good place to be. The other thing I'm going to say is, in the middle of that is back away a little bit from that incident data and focus more on the people, because you do know where you went, even if you don't necessarily know why you went there. So if you focus on the people and you look at the risk engaged in the demographic profile, you have a really good starting point.
I appreciate that. That makes a lot of sense.
Yes. Who was your instructor at NFA? Was it the
Mike,
fabulous Mike Weller?
It was, yes.
Okay.
I just got back 2 weeks ago from.
Oh, good for you.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Yes.
We love it there, and always encourage people to go.
Yes, he was
even,
great. We had a great time.
I was gonna say, Robert spoke, I was like typing up a thing in chat and I was like, maybe he doesn't want to listen to me. I don't know, philosophize, but it's just such a good experience there. And I think one of the best parts is like the camaraderie you develop and experiences like these chats on Zoom, like local conferences and seminars, workshops. Karen put in the chat that we also have a Zoom opportunity that we do once a month. Like that helps keep that camaraderie alive, and don't feel intimidated to ask questions of people. Like even one of my answers to Sarah in the chat about lift assist, it's like, you are not the only one with these problems. Like there are other fire departments in your exact spot, and there's no need to reinvent the wheel if someone else has already found something workable. You know, so keep that community bit alive for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah. Chelsea turned her slides off because the internet was a little spotty, but you know, I think on that right before you clicked out over into the dashboard, we had a slide that was like, you know, work smarter, which is really just saying that because this is the Smart Firefighting Roundtable. But building a CRR network is critical, whether you're doing that by participating in classes at NFA or coming to the CRR kitchen table or the Smart Firefighting Roundtables. And the conferences that are out there. There are so many awesome conference opportunities that are happening this year. Definitely take advantage of those when you can. So we were just mentioning CFPI, which is California, but it's also a CRR leadership year for IAFC, which is happening in May in Tennessee. Fabulous, fabulous conference. I don't know if anybody's at the state level. I'll just say it, NASFM is getting in the game as well. They're having a CRR symposium for your state fire marshals and their staff as well in February. NFPA will have a rich CRR component at our June conference, and we're back in Vegas. I know that doesn't make everyone happy, but it makes me happy. So, but there really, really are lots and lots of opportunities to connect, find the people who are in this space and in this game, because they're the best people. First of all, it's just the most enjoyable, most collaborative group of folks that you could meet. And they really do raise each other up to meet with mutual success. So do that, lean on the tools. That's why I love these conversations. Find out what your gaps are. There's probably a tool that can help you overcome that gap. This is why we built Craig 1300, because we didn't think it made sense for people to spend years learning how to manipulate data. Let the tool do that so that you can focus on the actual intervention piece, and then leverage your partners. There are people out there who can do the things that you need done.
And just to add on to what Karen was saying, just know that we are documenting every single link and relevant point that's being said, and we'll do a recap report. And they're also, Karen and Chelsea lead these kitchen table type talks, very focused on CRR on a continued basis. So make sure to reach out to them, as well as then Brent Faulkner from Virtual CRR has a newsletter. So we'll continue to feed those resources. And technically we have 3 minutes left, but we're going to go a little bit over. I want to use this as sort of like rapid fire. Any sort of last, you want to drop your 2 cents, or you got a question, you want to make a point heard. You know, thanks Chad for coming up, you know, and some of the other notes, but I'm looking at, you know, whether it's Tom, Denise, Jeff, Lisa, Brianna, David, Sarah, Caleb Holt, you know, I'm looking at you, or any of the Loci team. I see some of you are here. Anything you want to say? We've got some time left, so just kind of open, ask if you want to come off mute. I just love hearing anything from various peanut galleries out there. If not, I know I can. All right, I see you, Caleb. I got my eyes on you. Caleb, give me something here. Give me something to chew on.
Welcome from a very chilly College Station. So I mean, I love the conversational piece. I think that more for me as a non-first responder, it's encouraging also to hear the conversation back and forth between the chiefs, where, you know, the data does get reported, but you know, maybe it's not how they're interpreting the data sets. I think there's probably a huge opportunity across. I'm on the technology side of things, so you know, there's a huge opportunity to display this data, you know, in a more meaningful way, and probably across the entire organization, within a fire department, to be able to say, hey, here are the numbers that we're reporting. We talk about metrics all the time and SMART goals. And, you know, we have found, as I've been standing up manufacturing facilities down here in Central Texas, is, you know, these guys, if you don't give them, you know, you don't give them the benchmark of what they need to hit, they don't have a way to measure it. And so I think that, you know, finding meaningful ways to do that, is something that, is really big. I mean, I just think about the meme that just came through the other day around gas stoves, and the administration wanting to get rid of gas stoves. But I remember one of the members that we had, Chief Don Oliver from the International Association of Fire Chiefs Technology Council. Gas stoves were the #1 leading cause of fires in his little town in Wilson, North Carolina. So they went around and they handed out, gas shutoff valves that really reduced that total impact on his community. So, I love the saying of, the best fire is the fire you don't have to fight. And so I think data really tells the story, and there's a lot of data out there right now. We just got to find a meaningful way to get it in front of each department. I don't know that I have the answer, but I'm encouraged to hear that there's still a big problem there that we can help out with. And, community risk reduction isn't necessary. It's no longer just the Dalmatian dog in the smokehouse for the little kids. It's, how does a business owner look at community risk reduction, and, how can my community be utilized, or how could my facilities be utilized in community risk reduction as well? So I don't think I have any more poignant than that, but was listening in. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks, Caleb. I love that. The best disaster, the best fire is the one that never happens. So that's a lot of what CRR is getting at. Continue a couple more minutes of this. Anyone else rapid fire? I just sort of voluntold Caleb, but I really appreciate anyone. There's so many good insights that come from someone new. Before we maybe let a couple other people who've already talked, maybe say a few more things before we wrap up. Sort of throwing it back out, whether I see Lisa, Brianna, Jeff, Peter, Anthony. Again, I don't want to force any envelope that's not there, but I'll kind of give another 10 seconds or so. If you want to come off mute, say anything, anyone else, forever rest and hold your peace, not a big deal. Totally fine. So I wanted to kind of now throw it to Kirk. I know you talked a bit early, and just kind of to help round us off here. We're 2 minutes past the hour. We're gonna just go maybe a max another 8 minutes or so past, and then kind of make sure we can continue to go off with our merry way. But Kirk, I know you had kind of talked about earlier and some of the futuristic stuff, or just any of your kind of synopsis on what you've heard, and Kirk, just kind of throwing the conch to you.
Thank you, Kevin. Always very inspiring. I'd say keep an eye out for what's coming. I was hoping Dr. Green might share a little bit what they're doing out at NASA. There is a huge landscape of live intelligence. How do we make our communities smart and resilient, risk reduction in the moment? This is one team out of Brazil that's looking at the highest probability of ignitions, 12-factor solution that on the same day that they had clusters of high probabilities of fire, they had ignition where they had those clusters. They said that they had the Caldor fire predicted like 45 days in advance as a very high probability, one of the 2 or 3 highest in the county, something like that. Look at folks at like DHS S&T's group, the new National Urban Security Technology Laboratory, who has an RFI out right now for mixed reality. How is mixed reality going to change this? As thank you to the teams at NFPA and so many other data teams that are ingesting and telling us, okay, this is your target space. Well, how are we going to visualize that data? How might we visualize it in 3D? House Resolution 1399 is talking about extended reality being maybe 23 million jobs by the end of the decade. There's a lot going on in that space. For those who are interested in 3D technologies, become part of the Metaverse Forum. 2,000 member teams have come together in just a matter of a couple months, because we're going to be like, how do we do spatial CRR? How do we do Web 3.0, Industry 4.0 CRR sort of in real time? Because we're going to have flying first responders before we know it. And I don't think we're ready for that. But it's exciting time. Down in there, Caleb's place is another team working on, say, the live 3D infrastructure for county or statewide or region-wide. Those are the sort of things that I just want to put out there as be thinking about what's next. Right? 1300 and Craig, amazing solution. What's coming down the pipe? is really exciting and going to be hard to get hold of the tail, so to speak. Thank you.
Thanks, Kirk. A lot of good stuff in there, and Chief Z, you've been a great mentor and just a friend to me over the years, and thank you for your comments today. Any sort of wrap up thoughts you have or kind of insights that you'd like to leave with the group here today on what we learned, and or any resources that you can, or ideas that you could leave us with here today?
You know, the best I would share is that the more we're able to share amongst a group, and it moves outward from our circle to others, and that we're willing to let go of our ideas and with some other folks, the more we can probably get ahead. And I think that's probably the real crucial thing. Have an open mind and be creative. That's
Thanks, Chief.
where it's at.
Well, Karen and Chelsea, you two have been rock stars today, and just to kind of give you a last final mic drop, or just kind of any sort of anything else, of maybe something you've learned from our conversation today, or something that you could leave us with here today to wrap up our CRR roundtable.
You go, Karen. I don't have a mic
Yeah, I
drop.
can see you. So, yeah, I mean, no real mic drop from me. Just like really excited to hear the insights from folks on the call and the interest, and just know that, you know, I know sometimes people think NFPA is like this aloof organization or whatever, but here we are, you know, this is us, this is the CRR team. Don't ever be afraid to reach out to Chelsea or I, because we're just happy to talk CRR when people are trying to get the job done out in the field. CRR Kitchen Table, email us just at crr@nfpa.org if you'd like to be added to that invitation list. And I hope we connect at some point in the future.
Yeah, sounds like we'll see a few of you at some upcoming events. So it'll be nice to see you again.
I put Karen and Chelsea's LinkedIn in the chat, and obviously they gave you the proper email. I put my LinkedIn in the chat, and you're all on the roundtable email or invite, calendar invite. So I'm going to continue to, we have some more in the works around artificial intelligence, around health and wellness, around leadership, and just a range of other topics. So if you've got ideas, let me know. Let me know you want to hear about. Make sure to continue to look out for the Smart Firefighting podcast, which we're putting out weekly. And really all this content is meant to benefit you. So anything we can do to continue to raise awareness about not only smart firefighting and technology, but best practices and collaboration amongst the great organizations across the industry, especially like NFPA. That's what we're here for. And you know, special shout out to our founding and made sponsor that helps make all this happen, Darley. Couldn't do without you, and just the NFPA and Kirk especially. Appreciate what you're all doing. Continue to use it all as a resource. That's what we're here for. So 8 minutes past our time. It's really been a fun, awesome roundtable to start off the year. Be on the lookout for what's next, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day today.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Have a great
Thank you.
night.
Have a
Take
good
care.
one.
Bye, everyone.
Cheers.
Bye.